hydrogen expert for climate fund managers, which is one of the largest investment funds in Africa, especially Namibia and South Africa, as well as Egypt. And I basically assess all the hydrogen and hydrogen derivative projects for them from a technical point of view, but I also talk about the business case and all these kinds of things. Don't worry. I do the same for two French investment houses, which I cannot disclose the name. And they are basically more focused on soft kind of projects in Norway. What I always think is important is that projects should be developed not from a financial point of view, but from a technical point of view. If a project is technically not feasible, the project will never be financially feasible. And that is what many people tend to forget. I also had a background with his competitor, McDermott, but also that EPC, those EPCs, they are very important, and at this moment, not everybody sees the importance of the EPC contractors, which are key in the development of hydrogen. And to make one remark already, I actually think that projects in Africa will be realized faster, safer, and better than projects in the European Union. And that's actually due to the EPC contractors who have more strict rules to do everything, and nobody wants to do a project in Africa without an EPC contract. And in Europe, you see in several situations that people want to do that. They say, well, we put some boxes next to each other, and then it will work. Well, that will not be the case. So you need these kinds of guys.
Thank you for the introduction. So, my name is Terry Brewer. I'm commercial director for a company called Relize. So Relize is the new vehicle of Technip Energies for the green hydrogen and Power-to-X. It's a joint venture between Technip Energies and John Cochrane Holding. So just a quick introduction for Technip Energies. Technip Energies is an engineering technology company. 15,000 people in 34 countries, large energy projects, execution, known for the execution excellence, so delivery of complicated, challenging, logistically challenging projects, technologically challenging. So I can only agree with your statement of when it comes to these new markets that you need somebody who has the overview and who will take the risk of getting the project all the way to delivery with the guaranteed performances. Africa is very important for us. Of course, with the history of Technip Energies in Africa, we are already present in many countries, mainly around the gas, natural gas, so Mozambique, Senegal, Mauritania, but also Egypt, and we're exploring many opportunities. The green hydrogen in Africa is, when I compare it to other places, it's quite interesting. We'll talk about it, but it has its own challenges, its own opportunities. I think it will take a little bit of time than the other regions, but the outcomes are actually very promising. So I'll leave it here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Now we are on this point. So it is potentially a win-win situation, because in Africa we have a lot of potential from the renewable energy, from the renewable.
It's okay.
It's working. Okay. From the renewable energy point of view, so we have a huge potential. And indeed, regarding the infrastructure, there is no infrastructure. So what William was telling before, that Europe is maybe more difficult to do something, where you have a green field, maybe you have the room to do things in the best way. But even if we are in the, let me say, win-win condition, so that European needs green energy and Africa is in the very good position to provide solar and wind as much as we need, there is a lot of gap that we have to close. So the point is, the production is feasible, or we have some gap that we have to fill. William?
Now, to be honest, I I think that the production of hydrogen and derivatives is basically only feasible in continents like Africa or Australia or Latin America. And it's not only the hydrogen, but what you should look for is conditions. And you have different kinds of conditions. The first condition is actually, do we have continuous available renewable energy at a low enough price? Otherwise, like Peter Paul indicated, your hydrogen costs will be too expensive. But you have to do something with your hydrogen. That's what everybody always tend to forget. You have to do something with your hydrogen. Hydrogen as such is nothing. So what makes Africa and even Latin America a little bit more interesting compared to Europe? Because in many countries you do have biogenic carbon available, or you do have iron ore available. And you don't want to export hydrogen from Africa to Europe. You want to convert it into a higher value product. For instance, if you convert iron ore to DRI, the price increase of the iron ore will be almost tenfold. So then you really make value out of your hydrogen. Will we like that in the Netherlands? I doubt it, but even ArcelorMittal indicated a few weeks ago they will not do DRI based on hydrogen in the European Union because hydrogen is too expensive. DRI transport is easy. Hydrogen transport is more complicated. Might not be difficult, but it's more complicated and more expensive. So if you look for conditions, Africa and Latin America and Australia are the regions to go. In the European Union, there are also locations, but not in the Netherlands and Belgium. We don't have any biogenic carbon. If you go to Norway or the Scandinavian countries or the Baltics or the Balkan and northern Spain, the situation is a little bit different. So what I always tend to say, to make hydrogen work, look for biogenic carbon or iron ore and develop your plants over there.
Thank you. I think it's a very good point, and I have even to add more on this because once that you have done, let me say, DRI, I think that you can even do plate on pipe and so on because maybe you are in the position not to lose the heat that you have in DRI. Once you produce DRI, you have some heat that is still on the material, so you can even do the next step and then sell. So you can even increase 10 times to 50 times and so on.
And the same is for fertilizer. Africa is not using enough fertilizer to maximize the production. So if you produce the fertilizer in Africa, the farmers will be very happy and will actually make a lot more money afterwards.
Please,
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're all agreeing that, I mean, today, just looking at export for the green hydrogen coming out of Africa is not the only way to look at it. I think the local demands and the local added value projects are the one that will make or break these kind of projects. And we can see it in development of ammonia to fertilizer in Morocco, or I would say hydrogen to DRI steel in Mauritania or in other places. So just producing ammonia and exporting ammonia is not the only solution. There are other solutions, and it needs to be looked at carefully. Of course, the stream going to ammonia is the easiest way because of the nitrogen availability that we have, and it's just straightforward. But it's definitely we need to think about. We need to think about adding value and getting the biogenic CO2 and injecting it in the green hydrogen coming out of Africa.
Okay, thank you. So the point is that we have a big opportunity, but we can even increase this opportunity from hydrogen to add value with other production. But for the time being, we are even, let me say, in the position that we are going to start this kind of design, because we are thinking that this happen in, let me say, 1 or 2 years, but we are in very early stage. It takes time to build all this infrastructure, to set up the roadmap of the country and design which could be the hub for exporting and hub for importing both hydrogen, ammonia, and maybe DRI. So I have been in Mauritania 1 month ago with the European Commission, and I saw that there is a huge potential capability. There is the SLIM that is working for iron ore production, there is a wind, there is a solar, and there is some infrastructure in place that potentially can be grown up. But there is everything to be done. So what is, for your point of view, for your prospection, to do in country like Mauritania to speed up this production?
Of course, in country, I mean, there is a need for capacity building. We heard earlier about developing skills in the country. I think this is very important because we need to bring value to the country itself and not just develop this project as only export-based project. You need to maintain some value within the country, and I think in countries where we have issues about scarcity of water and things like that, perhaps these projects can, through their development, through their investment, can bring in some desalination infrastructure. Of course, the port developments are very important. The roads, the access to electricity for the population, where this big project will be developed in order to get their full, I would say, buy-in into the project themselves. This project will take a lot of acreage, will impact perhaps local communities. So we need to look into, when we look inside the country, we need to look into bringing value, development, access to basic needs, electricity, fresh water, infrastructure, and of course the development of human resources. This is, I think, needs to be an integral part of the development itself. So in Rely Technip Energies, when we go and we install ourselves in a country like, I will take Mozambique as an example. 8 years ago we were not present in the country. Today we have an operating center with 100 engineers. Out of the 100, there are just 2 expats in this operating center. We have developed resources in Mozambique that are today used in our headquarters in Paris, used in our projects in the Middle East. But this is the type of added value that we need to bring to the country.
So, I mean, human capital is something that is very important for this enterprise, for this growing. But you taking about 8 years. 8 years, it is something that is, let me say, seems today a long time. To bring, to grow human capital is not so long time.
Yeah, but 8 years, I mean, these projects will take probably that time to develop. You will have pre-FID studies that can take up to 2 years of development, and then the project themselves, they can go all the way to 4 or 5 years. So I agree with you, when we look at 8 years is long, but in the life of projects, 8 years is not that long. It's actually tomorrow.
Yes, I want to put another point to William. So 8 years is not long for grow this kind of project. We see that in some conditions we are rushing a lot in terms of announcement on project but once they go to the final investment decision, there is a little bit a strange happening that few projects go ahead because of several points that could be the many are from the financial point of view. So there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of let me say possible gaps that are not covered. So you are an advisor. So what is your opinion on this point? Why don't many projects go ahead?
Basically because there is no business case. And there is no business case because at this moment it's too expensive to produce green hydrogen or derivatives, and nobody wants to pay for it. And that is what the First Lady said as well, where we need to collaborate. because we can try. Obviously, there will be don't misunderstand me wrong. There will be export in the beginning because there are no downstream plants. And it takes much longer to develop a downstream plant compared to a hydrogen or an ammonia plant. So an urea plant is much more complicated. So don't misunderstand me. But it will be for a short period of time. When I was with Stamikabon, we only looked at the input prices of natural gas to develop a plant. And we never went to the European Union because it was too expensive. So we always went to Nigeria or something like that. And the reasoning for that is that the capex has an influence on the molecule price, but it is a relatively low influence compared to the OPEX. And that is what people tend to forget. But we will need export in the beginning because there is no capital in Africa. And in order to get the capital, you need some confidence that you will get capital, but for doing it. But what will Europe do if we will not have any plants in Antwerp or in Rotterdam or Gemmelot or in Germany? And that is what the European Union should focus on and collaborate with continents like Africa. And that's, for instance, what Rely. They should put Rely in a position to develop new technologies and to develop their capabilities, which they can deploy in Africa. They should put TNO in a position to, or the next gen district in Antwerp, to develop the new things that are potentially can be used in Africa, not over here. Basically, to say it a little bit bluntly, the chemical industry, an energy-intensive industry in the European Union, or at least this part of the European Union, will basically not be profitable in due time compared to the same industries in Africa or Latin America. Therefore, that new business case is actually technology development and equipment manufacturing, and companies like Rely to do their activities in regions where the conditions are best. And that is what we need to do for the projects.
Thank you a lot, because it is a different perspective. That nowadays we that are in Europe thinks that the center of the world is Europe. So we think that we have done things in the same way for a lot of time. So we have to do the same for the other hundreds of years. But the perspective that you are giving is where is the energy, where the energy is cheap, should be there, the production should be there, all the capability to have affordable, green and economically convenient way to develop both Africa country, but even to let us have the price of hydrogen, of energy, and even the byproducts that can be derived at the same level. So the point that you highlight is the technology. Technology is very important because with the technology we can deliver a cheaper price energy, we can produce hydrogen at a cheaper price. There is a lot of, let me say, focusing on electrolyzer, on system for production hydrogen, and even connected to several balance of plant that can be the water. There is a lot of discussion about the purifying water, how it should be the contaminant and so on. So there are many fields that have to be studied, but takes time, takes proper time to deliver this action. So my question is, are we pushing a lot to force this project to come ready, and so we are expecting that all these final investment decision came, let me say, through very early, or we have to, let me say, push more on technology, on development, on enable new capability to be at a stage of make this kind of investing more convenient, more reliable as a business plan in the market. So, because I see several of these struggling on this point.
First of all, technology is important in due time, but we cannot wait for technology. And that's the same thing. So what Rely now is doing, for instance, with John Cockerill, is they put more or less a standard kind of plant in, which is good. Because if we don't have the first plant, we never have the second plant with a better technology. But what we should look for is how to enable that first plant that Rely is putting in a certain country to be competitive in 5 years' time. Because it will not be competitive operational-wise. Because in 5 years' time, there will be systems which are cheaper and can produce the same hydrogen at a lower cost. That is something where we should focus the subsidies on. Not on putting the same alkaline system 10 times in the European Union or in Africa. Related to Africa, in the European Union we will get some FIDs. But I think that in Africa there will be many more FIDs, faster taken, like we already see nowadays in Latin America. And one of the things, and that's not that nice for the European Union ones, but very nice for the African people over here. In Africa, they're much more practical than over here. In the European Union, we like PowerPoints, and more PowerPoints, and more PowerPoints. And we want consultants that are established with governments, and they know the people from the government. They're coming from the electricity side and have no clue about molecules. And in Africa, what you see is that it's actually companies doing it, and the companies with knowledge about the molecules. And that is why the projects are realized. They're not waiting on subsidies. They build a project which is profitable because it's profitable. And if they get subsidies, it's nice. In the European Union, what we do, we wait for subsidies, and if we don't get it, we wait for even more subsidies, and if we get them, we wait for even more subsidies. And we keep on waiting and preparing very beautiful PowerPoints without any steel in the ground.
Please.
I mean, just to come back on this balance between technology and FID, I think there's also this dilemma, which is you want to be the first mover, or do you want to wait for the technology to be optimized in order to improve your business plan. So it is this balance, and hopefully our hope is that, because in order for the technology to be improved, we need to operate plants, and we need to begin building these plants and operate them, and begin learning the learning curve on them right now. And this is very important. That's where we need the support of the governments, we need the support of the subsidies, and it is extremely important in the African Union, in our African countries, that they have the support from the international community to develop this project. Again, I go back just to the basics. Africa today, if you look at the carbon emission coming out of Africa, we're talking about probably 10 times less than an African is emitting, 10 times less than a Canadian today. So, and how can we bring just value with it without helping them go into the green revolution is something that we, collectively need to think about it. And so to move this first project, we definitely, there should be some support from the international community and from the Green Fund and whatever thinking.
Sure. So we are about to close this panel, but before to close, I invite the participant, if there is any question important that want to, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this insightful panel. My question will be for William, but also for you, Antonio, because I think we've discussed this subject this morning. In terms of derivative, we've talked about green steel, we've talked about agriculture, but I think in countries like Mauritania, where you have a strong fishery capacity or strong fish resources, there is also the possibility of aquaculture with oxygen. And I wanted to know, based on your experience with them, did you saw this in one of the countries that are working on projects with the derivative of hydrogen, or this would be a niche market that maybe could be adopted in Mauritania? Thank you.
Well, I don't know the fishery business too well. I don't know Mauritania too well. But I'll give you an example from basically technology development. I used to be a TNO. I was dealing with CO2 reduction, electrochemistry, and hydrogen project, but especially the CO2 reduction, electrochemistry.
in order to make your product that you want to make feasible, what you want to do is to have on the other side of the electrolyzer another product that has value. So if you can valorize your oxygen in the fishery business, I don't know how it works, but probably you can, then you immediately make a lot of more money. The same is in future you will get oxy-fuel kind of technologies even more, because those are the technologies where you can use oxygen as well. It is a valuable product, not nowadays because it's basically getting into the air. But if you can do that, then you basically are a winner. I think that in steel production you can also have some kind of oxy-fuel activities, and then your oxygen also gets a value. What we have to look for with hydrogen is what I said in the beginning. Hydrogen is nothing. Absolutely nothing if you don't do anything with it. We can try to bring it to the Netherlands or Belgium with ammonia, crack it back to hydrogen. But if it is too expensive and nobody can use it, we leave it in storage and nothing is done with it. The same is with the oxygen. We now don't do anything with it, but if you can do something with it, you create basically a business case. So yes, the other thing why the fisheries sector might be very interested in this is that I don't think that in the next few years at least, there will be lots of gigawatt kind of electrolyzers. It will just be too complicated to do that. So I presume in the fishery you don't need a lot of hydrogen, oxygen, but it's just my guesstimate. So in that case, if you start with 20 megawatt or 50 megawatt or something like that, then you might produce sufficient oxygen. And then you go to my neighbor and he can build you a standardized electrolyzer, which also produces your oxygen, I guess. You want to comment on it?
Yeah, and of course the e-fuel that is associated to,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, the main idea is to find substitute in terms of fuels to what we are today using. So definitely that's where green hydrogen is coming in, but perhaps we have other venues to add value and to improve the business case of the green hydrogen production, and the I would say having value on the oxygen production is definitely something that needs to be thought of.
The question was also for you.
Yeah, yes, we were talking this morning. There is the huge potentiality to have the improvement of fishery with the oxygen, and this can be helpful, can be something that can give some back to the country where you are producing that, so that improve the way to have food and go on. The oxygen can be even used for the waste treatment, so can be even used for other sector, can be even used in the steel making. So there is a lot of use that can be done if you look at the market that can be applied on. So that is a very good potentiality to close the business plan, because at the end you have to have money back. So we have another question on the other side.
My question is to Tarek. But Willem, I think at the beginning, he mentioned that EPCs are the key to realize the first hydrogen projects in Africa. So my question to Tarek is then, how then you, from the EPC point of view, how you plan to tackle the price inflation, let's say, aspect in it? I mean, I'll explain what I mean by price inflation. Today, you know that people start with concepts, and we see one price of hydrogen or derivative. Then you do your pre-feed studies or feed studies, you already have a much bigger price estimation. And then you come to the EPC, not only the RAI, and then you have even higher price. And then, as in fact, your business case is there. So we see this price increase as you develop the project, hydrogen projects today. So how the EPCs, which are a great tool indeed to handle the risks and deploying high-risk projects everywhere in the world, Africa including, but how EPC plans to tackle now those let's say, risks in a way, probably internal risks, so at least to decrease or to mitigate that gradual price increase as you develop the project.
It's a great question, but it's a question for everyone who is dealing with supply chain and commodities. Now, in terms of development of projects, let's perhaps get to the basics. So I agree, we agree that there's some inflations in terms of the perception of inflation. Again, it's a perception of inflation because when we are looking at the concept, we forget a lot of things, and when we're adding things together, I would say we are getting more to the reality than to what has been thought of at the concept phase. And as we're moving to reality, there might be more added blocks. But hopefully, I mean, the main idea is before FID, you have a confidence on the number, and that numbers is fully in line with the business plan. And this is the main idea. Once you sign an EPC, EPC is delivery. EPC is buying, delivering, and operating. It's a very straightforward where you think about construction, you think about vendors, managing the quality, while managing the HSC, managing the detail engineering. It's very, I would say, concrete delivery of products. And that's, I would say, the clients, especially if we're talking about project finance setup, the clients will try to mitigate that through the most lump sum turnkey contract as possible. Will be some pushbacks, but it is the game, the game of that we need to play with the clients. But this is our bread and butter. This is what we do, is delivery projects. Then again, in terms of cost estimate and of the projects, they are really from the concept to the end of the feed. I agree with you. Most of the time, we have some perception of inflation, but this is just due to the fact that at the concept level, we didn't look at everything. And actually, that's why I'm encouraging all the clients is to come to Technip Energies and rely when they are doing this kind of pre-feed and feasibility, because we will give you the right number. And most of them are not very happy when we come up with the cost estimate, because we are realistic. We are not consultants just working on papers. We go back to the market. We have our database in terms of procurement. We know how construction is being done. So I can assure you that when we have cost estimate coming out of feasibility, pre-feed, and feed, we have a lot of discussion with our clients. But this is, again, this is the gap between the perception at the beginning and the reality of the market when it comes to it.
And the same, I think it's very important what you're just saying about involving the EPC and actually it can also be a good owner's engineer's code or something like that have the same business cases. Because even in Europe, if you see the projects that will be realized, are doing that in a very early stage. One of the projects they are working on is Arcadia e-fuels in Denmark. I supported their investor, basically. But to give some insight, Technip, not Rely, but Technip was already involved in a very early stage in that project, working together with the people from Arcadia to get the project actually from an early stage, and there hasn't been many differences going up the price. It was from the start, it was very good calculated in the beginning. And that's why it is so important to have those professional parties involved in an early stage. At the same time, I think that due to the context with as an EPC contractor with vendors, they can actually reduce the cost as well, because they can negotiate much better than any project developer to get stuff cheaper. And so that is one of the great things. But most of all, from my experience with McDermott, where I also have been involved with, the bigger electrolyzer plants will have a huge problem because of safety. And if you don't have an EPC contractor, I can tell you many of them will blow up. Not maybe the first year, but after the second or the first, or the third or the fifth year. And the reasoning for that, for the bigger ones, is that if you integrate, for instance, the gas treatment, the moment that you can measure oxygen and hydrogen, or hydrogen and oxygen, that you can measure that, it will take, I think, 30, 40 seconds. And at that moment, your plant is already exploded. So then it's nice to measure it, but it doesn't work. And EPCs are the parties that are working on these kinds of challenges to deal with that. That's not the OEM, that's the EPC who is doing that. And that is, if you don't use that EPC party, then you have a challenge with your project to get it in operation and continuous in operation.
Okay, This is another point that the asset integrity and management of this plant is the first of the kind. We do not have this long track record as a oil and gas plant, a refinery plant, and so on. That is a lot of structure in terms of performance, working window. That is always the same thing for several years, but there is a lot of knowledge and way to handle this kind of plant. So we have to close. We got a little bit run out of time, but ask you 3 points that we have to highlight to enhance or to your point of view to do in order to start with the hydrogen production in Africa. 3 points that you see that have to be done from the point of view of advisor and EPC. Thank you.
This is the hot potato.
Yeah.
Yeah, three points. I mean, just off my head. Construction risks. Construction risks is not to be underestimated. Especially if we're in remote areas, logistics are complicated. Having the right construction contractor on board early, and of course, I would say, just from a very high level, hopefully some commitment on the offtake. That will definitely be a push to make this project happen. And of course, I would say structured development of projects. That's mean going through feasibility, pre-feed, feed are very important. Again, for what you have just said, the perception of inflation, but it's not it's just the fact that you need to capture all of these elements before you go into FID. You need to evaluate all your risks. So construction risk, offtake, and structuring the project.
What I would start with, and that's not only for Africa, that is also for the European Union, work with reliable people. There are many people out there that you actually cannot trust. And that's not only small companies, often the small companies, but also bigger companies. So there are many project developers out there that in the end will get burdened because some bigger companies or some smarter people legally basically take them out. And that, because of that, projects will die. The second thing, what I think is very important, understand how the value chain works. Understand where you can make more value. Understand what your local conditions are. In Namibia, for instance, if there is some iron ore, but in general there are no people, or more or less no people, so then you have to go for exporting markets, because there's nothing where you can use it locally. That might be through a pipeline, might be it might be through ammonia or whatever. So the Hyphen projects, etc., they're very great that they looked into that. So that's the second point, look into that value, because South Africa is another, on the other hand, they have lots of biomass and they have the capabilities and the engineers, etc. So it's much easier to do for projects in South Africa compared to Namibia. But probably the best is Egypt. Egypt has many ammonia plants already, so if you can feed in some green hydrogen, you can immediately valorize it without any risk, because the ammonia plant is there and the operators are there as well. So, so look at the local situation, what you have to do, and do not listen to European people if you want to make a successful projects in Africa.
I give mine and then we close. For me, find your business, in a sense, find your customer, what they need. Then make a plan that is a plan that works for your country. Egypt is a story, Morocco is another, Namibia is another. So make a plan, master plan, and then choose the right people to follow it. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, gentlemen. I believe, don't do business with European people. Contact us in Africa. We take you everywhere.
Thank you.
So we're going to do quickly presentation of Snam, and after that we're going to lunch, and then I believe we can try to be faster to capture what we waste as a time. So, and then our lunch will be like 45 minutes only, so we can try to do and finish early. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, excellent. Here we go. I'll try to be quick, given the time. So Julia Branzin from SNAM, which is the largest infrastructure operator transporting gas and storing gas across Europe. So today I was going to give you a bit of an insight of what we're doing from a project level, and a bit of an insight of what we see as the regulatory and policy barriers. That's what I focus on at SNAM, both in Europe and in Italy. Because, I mean, we discussed a lot about the things that prevent projects to go into FIDs, and from our perspective, the regulatory policy elements are quite important in the sort of reconstruction of the picture. So, from the project point of view, we are developing together with three additional transmission system operators in Europe project, which is the South A2 corridor. So the South A2 corridor is one of the 5 corridors comprising the European hydrogen backbone, which is the broader underlying infrastructure of the future hydrogen markets in Europe. So we have got confirmation from the Commission earlier this year that this project is going to be recognized as one of the projects of common interest. And the South A2 corridor, so it's basically a corridor connecting North Africa with Europe through Italy, with continental Europe through Italy, has the potential to deliver more of 40% of the REPowerEU import target, which is 10 megaton of hydrogen. So the potential of import capacity associated with this corridor is up to 4 mtons. Then, of course, the volumes will be determined by market condition. But this is what it is from an infrastructure point of view. So going into the next slide. Yeah, so this is, I mean, just to reiterate what we were discussing the whole morning, so that there is quite of a slow progress from announcement to FIDs if we look across the board. But Europe, it is actually leading the way with project proposals with 35% of global investments, also thanks to stronger policy push. So there is, I mean, it is a bit difficult to compare like for like the policy provisions and regulatory provision that has been put forward in Europe with other geographies, because the approach that Europe has taken is at value chain level. It is more mature than what it was a couple of years ago, when all the legislation, the Fit for 55 legislation, was in under development. There are still some elements that are quite important. The main one, I would say, is the certification of blue hydrogen, which isn't there yet. But the one thing that characterizes the policy and regulatory provisions in Europe is that they address the supply, infrastructure, and demand. Whereas if you look at, for example, at the US, they do have policy provisions, I mean, they're quite simple, quite effective, but just addressing the production side, and that to some extent in the longer term creates more uncertainty from the FID perspective. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick review of what I was referring to just now, as in this across segment of the value chain policy and regulatory provisions that have been taken in Europe. So I suppose the main drivers that are arguably driving the markets are standards. So where you have the delegated acts on RFNBO, it means that Europe has developed standards to say what conditions need to be respected for hydrogen to be classified as green. Why is that important? Because the green status has some monetary value attached to it. So Europe has set out targets which come out with the obligations that have to be imposed by member states at national level. And this is for the industry sector and for the mobility sector. If the hydrogen is classified, and this relates to both to domestic production and to production outside Europe, so including in Africa, if hydrogen has to be accounted towards this target, it has to comply with these certification rules, which are embedded into the delegated acts on our RFNBOs. One thing that is still outstanding is, as I was saying before, the standard on low carbon hydrogen, and that is very relevant because it actually determines what the cost, the underlying cost of hydrogen is, and the competitiveness of the EU as the potentially an import area for hydrogen. One other very important milestones of the whole EU regulatory framework has been the hydrogen and gas decarbonization package. That is important because it basically defines how the infrastructures are going to be regulated, the access rules, and it defines whether hydrogen is seen in Europe as a large market along the sides of the gas market, or whether it's seen as a decentralized local market. And the answer, I mean, looking at the gas package, basically they are mirroring pretty much the regulatory provisions that were set once in place with the third energy package for gas. So they're seeing, I mean, if you do have the need to have a regulated infrastructure with third-party access, then it means that you are expecting large markets. So the regulatory framework in Europe is, as I was saying, fairly advanced, almost complete. So what happens now is that the directives, the EU directives, have to be implemented at national level to become legally binding. So this is just a glance of what's happening in Italy. So in Italy we had some allocations throughout the recovery and resilience facility towards hydrogen. It's 3.6 billion, and it's mostly grants. Mostly grants allocated to valleys, to hydrogen valleys and to hydrogen manufacturing. What needs to happen yet in Italy, and it is something that is under discussion, they're going to come out with a proposal on what they're going to do to subsidize production on an ongoing basis. So basically to put forward something similar to what the EU has put forward with the European Hydrogen Bank, so contract for differences. It is something that they're working on. They're also sort of working on it on the back of the results of the EU Hydrogen Bank. But this is probably the sort of most powerful thing that need to happen, not only in Italy but in other member states as well, to make sure that projects are de-risked by contractualizing on a long-term basis, at least 10, 15 years. Previous slide, please. Hydrogen production. Then there are a number of other things that can be done, and in Italy have already happened, that impact the cost of production and therefore help reducing the funding gap between the cost of production and the willingness to pay, which is the creation of a register of guarantees of origin for hydrogen. So this helps bridging that gap, because the guarantees of origin can be traded, and the way they're traded depends on how they can be used. So basically, if they can be used to comply with the targets that was mentioned before, they have a monetary value attached. One discussion that is happening, and I think it's quite important in the discussion in relation to cross-border trade between Africa and, well, in this case I'm talking about Italy, so EU through Italy, is whether you can sell, so basically if you can connect production in North Africa with consumption in Italy or elsewhere in continental Europe through the use of guarantees of origin of blended hydrogen. As in, even if you don't have a pure hydrogen pipeline developed because the demand is not big enough, if at member state level, Italy and Austria and Germany decide to discipline at national level the guarantees of origin regime in a way that makes the same guarantees of origin of hydrogen that is blended and guarantees of hydrogen that is pure worth the same, you can connect right away industrials in the north part of Italy with production in North Africa. So it is a decoupling of the renewable attribute of the hydrogen, but it is something possible. So the EU leaves the open free for member states to decide what they want to do. So this is something that is already possible if they decide to do so. Next slide, and then I'll probably let you go for lunch. So this is a slide sort of trying to summarize a bit what's left to be done. So the point on guarantees of origin, I just touched upon, but I think it's very important that guarantees of origin are disciplined in a harmonized way across the countries that are receiving the hydrogen in order to sort of give certainty to the investors that are interested in a specific line of the hydrogen corridor. Otherwise, it's going to be fragmented policy framework, difficult to sort of backward engineer what is the value that you can actually sell your hydrogen to. Network charges, there have been some exemptions already, not only in Italy, in a number of other countries, of network charges, electricity network charges. So basically the charges that apply to the electrolyzers when they withdraw electricity from the grid. The approach is quite not homogeneous across Europe. Again, it would be desirable if across Europe there was an uniform approach, again, to sort of improve investors' visibility on that. And from our point of view, what should be guaranteed is that hydrogen electrolyzers are put to the same level as batteries and other forms of flexibility to the electricity system, because that's one of the things they do as well. There is policy provisions that will be standing from the EU directive on reforming electricity market design, favoring the liquidity of the PPA market and the HPA markets, and the broader use of control for difference in the electricity sector that will decrease the cost of electricity, so improve the business case. And this is something, again, yet to be defined. And then there is the rules that was mentioned before, determining the conditions to access to transport infrastructure, transport distribution and storage infrastructure that have to be applied at member state level. Long story short, so I've been trying to sort of go straight to the messages, that there has been a very wide set of EU provisions developed in the last 2 years. So in the last 2 years, that there has been probably less progress than what we wish to see, because all these rules had to fall into place. Now they have finally, well, around the end of last year, around the end of 2023, fallen into place. There are 2 years for most of the EU directives for implementation at member state level. One thing which is key is certification, guarantees of origin, and that is something that could link right away North Africa with continental Europe. So this is my takeaway. We are quite positive about the development of hydrogen, and positive that we're seeing probably a bit of a slower progress than what we had wished, because all these complex rules, I mean more complex than, again, what the rules look like in the US, had to be defined, but now they are to be implemented, and we're positive that this is going to push the market further. Thank you very much, and enjoy your lunch.
Any other questions to her, or we can go to lunch?
Oh, sorry. I thought
That's
we
why
were
we like
rushing
to see
for
what.
lunch.
Yeah, only 3 questions.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Really, the only
Pleasure.
3. Yeah.
My question is related to CO2, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We are working with a cement plant in Africa. And in order to methanol, we are more or less forced to not use the CO2 from the cement plant in Africa, but to use the CO2 from a cement plant in Europe, export cement, the CO2 from Europe to Africa, to convert it into methanol, to put it in a ship in Africa, to drive it back to as a fuel for
Because it's
for a ship.
biogenic?
Because it's ETS, so there is no ETS scheme on the cement plant in Africa,
Yeah.
and therefore the CO2 is not, although the fuel is only biogenic, but it doesn't matter. It is not counted green because it is not ETS, whatever. Isn't in that way the regulation in the European Union actually slowing down the development of these kinds of projects? Because it doesn't make sense to bring the CO2 from the European Union to Africa while the CO2 is over there as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for this question. So there is, so one of the first line, it says promoting regulatory and policy convergence with Northern Africa. So I suppose where we're at is that in Europe it took a long time to determine all these rules. I mean, the hydrogen, for those that are in the room that have been following the discussions on the RFNBO delegated act, it took 2.5 years, 3 to determine these rules.
Yep.
And also the revision of the EU ETS. So now there is going to be, so one important thing that is going to happen is that there is going to be additional regulation on biogenic CO2 and negative emissions. And once that is crystallized, then you will have to have also with third countries, including Northern Africa, rules that determine how the CO2 is recognized within also third countries once the framework in Europe is crystallized. So we had to wait, for example, we do know at the present that the certification rule for green hydrogen have to be respected also in third countries because it is written in that delegated act. We don't know yet how biogenic CO2 is going to be treated when it comes from third countries. So that, I mean, there are still gaps, but we are in a much better position than what we were 2 years ago, I suppose. So that is an outstanding regulatory gap, I would say, the one you're
But
highlighting.
don't we shoot ourselves in our own feet? Because that methanol, or SAF, the same thing, in Africa, and SAF is a little bit easier. If I produce that in Africa, I can put it into a plane, whatever, from Egypt to fly to South Africa and back, because then European law doesn't.
Yeah,
Don't
it's
count.
clearly, I mean,
So
efficient,
it is,
and it's
and
a
then you will
regulatory
not
gap
get
that
any-
creates inefficiencies
So,
and on this
uh,
interest because the framework is incomplete. But
Okay.
I appreciate, I mean,
Yeah.
I appreciate there is an issue there. Thank you.
One more.
I have a question to make. It's, but what is the timeline for the realization that you envision for the pipeline? Because you get a lot of support from the EU. You are now also recognized as a
PCI.
so that means that you probably will get even more.
Yeah, so the time scale is 2030 of all the corridors, including ours. Yeah.
And that's you're on schedule.
Yeah, I mean, from the infrastructure point of view, surely we are, yes.
But this is the connection only to up to Sicily, isn't it? Or is
No,
it
no,
the
no, no,
connection-
it's the whole corridor. So it's, if you go to the first slide, I mean, there is a very rough map because, so it is the whole corridor. So part of it is in Italy, part of it is in Austria, and part of it is in
I meant
Germany.
the connection to Tunisia and Algeria.
So that
Not
is, I mean, that isn't formally part of the same project. We are working towards a PMI because in Europe, if it is within the EU, it's called PCI, otherwise it's a PMI. And that is another project which, of course, it's linked to that. But the figures I gave here are in relation to the EU segments of the corridor. Of course, there is a segment which is connecting with Tunisia.
And what's the timeline for this segment?
Yeah, it is going to be aligned with this timeline, so 2030.
Just ask an additional question about the certificates of origin. I mean, clearly here your focus is on hydrogen that would be produced either in Tunisia or in Algeria and presumably piped to Italy and then fed into the northern European network. I mean, several of us here are sort of working on projects in other jurisdictions where transport to Europe may be more of a challenge. How do you see the certificate of origin discussion playing out for those countries?
When you mean when it's through shipping, for example? Okay, so through shipping is not me that I see, so it's the Renewable Energy Directive that says that basically the gas has to be injected into the network for there to be this mutual recognition of guarantees of origin. Then there are ways to certify, so I mean, the considerations I made here around blending immediately legally apply insofar Italy, Austria, and Germany, or even only Italy, and then you can access the demand in Italy, introduce those provisions that make ETS compatible the guarantees of origin of blended hydrogen and quota compatible those guarantees of origins. For those that are not, I mean, for that hydrogen that is not injected into the networks, I'm not saying it's not possible to do. You won't do it probably with the guarantee of origin. You would do it in another way with the certification of sustainability. So it isn't that automatic, so to say. And this is because of the Renewable Energy Directive. That's what they say.
Thank you. Yeah, just one quick follow-up question on the link with Africa then. So is that going to be basically a new pipeline that runs parallel to Transmat, or is that going to be, you're not planning to blend with supply, with the natural gas supply that runs through Transmat?
We're planning to this corridor from the Italian segment point of view foresees up to 70% of repurposing of the existing infrastructure. So it is
so that's
mostly
including the link, the gas link with Tunisia. All right.
So it is
And that
mostly
could be-
repurposed.
And that could be possible already by 2030, because I mean you'd still be carrying quite a lot of gas volumes, I suppose, by 2030. But you think you could still use quite a chunk of that?
The assumptions, I mean, the assumptions we're working on together and the dialogue with the Commission is towards that direction, yes.
Thank you very much. So we can have our lunch. Please, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Julia, let's have lunch. Only 45 minutes, guys, so we can try to. I'm sorry. Traffic.